Text, Real Abilities Film Festival. Feature Film Q&A, CODA, 10/21/22. People on a stage.
So without further ado, I'd love to introduce everyone here on the stage. I'm going to start with Shoshana. She's there on the end. Shoshana is a writer and executive producer, also an actress. Shoshana Stern created, wrote, executive produced, and starred in the critically acclaimed Sundance Now series, This Close, with Josh Feldman. Her writing has been featured in the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times. Her work as an actor includes stints on Grey's Anatomy, Supernatural, Jericho, and Weeds. She is currently developing a thriller for AMC called Disquiet. And she wrote for the upcoming Marvel series Echo. And she lives on her bio, which I love that she says, happily in Los Angeles with her much-loved family. So welcome, Shoshana. She's going to be moderating tonight for you. And then Siân Heder. Good to see you in the middle there, right? Round of applause. So Siân is a writer and a director, an Academy Award-winning writer and director. Her debut feature, TALLULAH, starring Elliot Page and Alison, Janney, premiered at the Sundance Festival in 2016 and was released as a Netflix original. Siân wrote and produced for 3 seasons of the Netflix series Orange is the New Black and has directed episodes of Glow, Orange is the New Black, The Path, and Little America. Her film CODA, that you just watched, debuted at Sundance in 2021 and was the first film in the festival's history to win all 4 major awards. It also sold to Apple for a record-breaking $25 million and received the BAFTA for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor and SAG Ensemble Award and the WGA Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. CODA received the Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor.
Shoshana waves hands.
And Troy Kotzer, here. I told him when I met him, he's got a beautiful smile, great smile. All right, so as we all know, Troy earned the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role as Frank in CODA. And Kotzer is the first deaf male actor and only the second deaf actor overall to ever win an Oscar. Kotzer also earned BAFTA, Critics' Choice, Gotham, Independent Spirit, and Screen Actors Guild Awards and was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for his role in CODA. In television, Kotzer was most recently seen in the Disney Plus series The Mandalorian, for which he created a special sign language there as well as Tuscan. That's how you say it? Yep. And was also used in the show's spin-off series, The Book of Boba Fett. Other television roles include CSI New York, Scrubs, and Criminal Minds. A native of Mesa, Arizona, Kotzer began acting in grade school, and I love this, with some of his earliest performances including reenacting Tom and Jerry cartoons for his classmates. Some of the younger crew in the audience might not even know who Tom and Jerry. Was it a cat and a mouse, right? All right, and then he went on to study theater, film, and television at Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., and following graduation, he toured with the National Theater of the Deaf. And Troy lives now in Mesa, Arizona, with his wife and his daughter. I'm proud to present all 3 for tonight's film festival. We'll have that, and then we'll wrap everything up. Enjoy.
Shoshana signs.
Okay, excellent. I am so thrilled to be here this evening to talk with both of you. Our community is so small, so I wanted to talk a little bit about how I know each of them, and which is actually kind of connected to the first question I have for both of you. So I first met Troy, I think I was 14 or 15. My dad drove me to see you in a Deaf West play called Orphans. And at that time, as I said, I was about 14 or 15 years old. Troy walked out on stage, and you just had this dynamic about you. I was entranced from the first moment. After the play, I was very nervous, but I wanted to go up and say hello and said I wanted to eventually be an actor. You were so nice and had this wonderful conversation with me. Everyone else left the room It was just us. I think my parents went out to dinner and they were saying, hey, you want to come join us? And you said, sure. So we had this great time, you, me, my parents. And I remember looking at you and thinking, again, I was a 14, 15-year-old girl looking at you going, this is so amazing. You inspired me. And so now, to be on this even bigger level, you're able to inspire so many other people, and that's just absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
And we also have friends in common because I have had friends that worked on Weeds, which had the same production team with Orange is the New Black. And we had a birthday party. And it was so great to be able to be involved with CODA. I was able to see that on part of the TV show that I was working on. It was so fantastic. And I thought, our community is so small. It's great to see how it connects. And I don't know if you knew about Troy when you were first starting CODA. So how soon in the process did you know about Troy?
So I discovered Troy through Deaf West. I went to see, when I was an outsider coming into this community. I was really aware of that, and I wanted to make sure that I was educating myself and really putting myself out there in ways. And I visited Shoshana's set and went to see this close and to see how they were running things. And then I went to a Deaf West play I saw at home at the zoo, and I saw Troy on stage. And from the moment that I first saw him, I thought, oh my God, that is Frank. And he came in and auditioned, and I thought that, but the character was very different than the character in CODA. He was kind of this buttoned-up professor, but he was a brilliant actor. And he came in to audition for me, and he came in and he had his cap on, and he kind of came in the room, was very funny, and he's got that like twinkle in his eye, and he just felt like he'd been on a fishing boat his whole life. And I was like, have you ever done this? Have you ever fished? He's like, no, I'm from Arizona. I've like never fished in my life. We have no water. But it was from the moment that I saw Troy, it was so clear that it was him. And I was thrilled because I was very invested. And at the time, CODA was a studio movie, and I was facing resistance in hiring deaf actors to play these roles. And the fact that I got to put talent in front of the studio and say, look at Troy Kotzer, look at Daniel Durant, look at these actors that you might not know because they've been on stage, but they're absolutely brilliant, and no one is going to be more right for this role. And it was a really amazing thing to have talent like Troy to put in front of executives who needed to also be educated and understand that there's so much deaf talent out there that largely have to work in theater or on TV when it's available, and to discover that Deaf West was holding all of these amazing actors and that there were many choices for these roles was really exciting to me.
Excellent. And where were you when you first heard about CODA, that there was a movie happening? What did you think? What did you first envision with all of this?
Well, when I was asked to audition, I was a little surprised that I was asked to be on camera. I thought when I met Sean, she was the assistant director. She was too young to be a director. That was my first thought. I didn't realize she was the one, and she was trying to sign to me and showing that willingness. And I said, just tell me what to do. I'll try. And after that audition, I guess it was a little bit of time before I heard from them. I mean, reading the script, I had to say that there was a full world there. I understood it. I have a daughter who's a CODA. I have so many friends who are CODAs. And I said to myself, this is it. And at that time, I was working as a client advocate at GLAD, the Greater Los Angeles Agency on Deafness. It's a community service agency, and I was working as an advocate there. And 3 months later, I got a call while I was working at the computer. I felt my phone vibrate. I picked it up. It said, you got the role.
He looks behind him.
And at that moment, I looked around the room to see if anybody was joking with me. I looked back at the phone. I said, are you serious? And I'll never forget my reaction. I passed out right onto my keyboard. My forehead hit the space bar, and the screen just scrolled for 50 pages. while I just laid there, just in shock. I felt like my body turned to ice. It's hard to explain. I was either full of heat or melting like an ice cube. It was both at once. And I just felt exhausted after all the years of getting to this point where all that exhaustion drained from my body. And I realized this is it. Sean's right. She came and watched us at Deaf West. And I realized that if you just keep following your dream, someone is out there watching. Occasionally, producers would come and see productions I've been in, and I've played many different characters, and there were many different moments where things could have happened, but because I was willing to play those different characters, because people like Sean are willing to come out and look for new talent, we found each other. Her heart reached out to me, and I thank her for that. And so we're here now. She led us to this moment, along with a wonderful production team, wonderful cast, and this woman right here fought for authenticity, and that's key where I come from. Hollywood is a tough place for us deaf actors, and without people like Sean, I would not be sitting here today, and that's just a fact, and I thank you for that, Sean. Here we are.
You're exactly right, Troy. Yes, here we are for sure. I remember the first time I heard about CODA. I had been talking with a friend of mine, Alexandria, Wales, who was working as an ASL master, was an ASL master for that. And she was talking about this film family and how it's this really small independent film that she was working on. And CODA is the little film that could, you know. And then it ended up winning Best Picture, hello, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actor, all of this. And I wonder if there was one moment where you felt like, you know what, this movie is going to really be something. Was there a moment when it really hit you?
When I finished the movie, I remember thinking, if the world were a just and fair place, Troy Kotsur would win an Oscar for his performance. And then I thought, but that's not how the world works. And this is this tiny indie movie, and we had no distributor in place, and Troy was unknown. And I was like, that's not how it works. That's not how Hollywood works. That's not what's gonna happen here. But it should happen because he's so fucking good, excuse my language. And I really just felt like that his performance and Daniel's performance and Amelia's performance, it's like my actors poured their hearts into these characters. And it was this tiny indie movie. And what Troy is leaving out, the reason that he waited so long to hear about this part was that the studio didn't make the movie. This was a studio movie. It was at Lionsgate. And all of the things that I was fighting for, my cast, wanting to have ASL on screen, not having Ruby speak through the whole movie, having subtitles and having pure ASL on screen, having a lot of silence in the film, not you filling every scene with score. Like all of these things were impediments for the studio. And they were the reason that the studio was not gonna make the movie. So it was dead. It was sat there at the studio for a really long time, and I couldn't get it out. I had no power. They'd bought my script. And then the head of the studio, Patrick Waxberger, left Lionsgate, and he took the movie with him as part of his deal. So we made it independently for a lot less money. We got French financing. We shot for 30 days in Gloucester. It was a very scrappy production. I was directing, but I was also on the boat, like shoveling fish from bin to bin. I mean, it was a really crazy time, but it was the exact right way for the film to get made because it got made with integrity. And that was a long fight to get there. But yes, even when we got nominated for an Oscar, I felt like we were the 10th party guest that was like, oh, I guess we can invite another one. Like, go invite that little guy over there. And so we I just felt so lucky to be there, and we were so new and excited to be in it. And then there was this feeling over awards season that like more and more people were watching the movie. And when I watched my actors win the SAG award, that was the turning point for me, where I felt like my heart exploded, and it was such a big moment. I would say that moment was bigger for me even than the Oscars, because it was my actors being recognized by their peers for these incredible performances, and it was a room full of every famous actor you could ever think of, and there's Javier Bardem jumping up, and Jessica Chastain, and Nicole Kidman on their feet for Troy and Marley and Daniel and Amelia. And it was just like that was the turning point for me, that I just felt like, oh wow, this is gonna go somewhere, and this is a pretty magical fairy tale story.
Wow. I'll get to you in just a second, Troy, but I just wanted to say, you're talking about things being barriers, right? Studios being barriers, having the silent times during the movie, having the captions on screen, all of that is ultimately the reason why it won the Oscars, because it made it accessible. So it's a benefit to everyone to have these accessible features included. And honestly, that applies to movies as much as anything. Now, Troy, go ahead.
It's amazing. This movie reached out to everyone, even though the president, the president invited us to go out to the home at the White House. I mean, come on. Wow. It really reached so many people despite all those barriers, like you said.
Yes, and that's the moment where you could really feel like, wow, maybe this movie is something. Or did it happen even earlier than that? What was the moment?
I mean, I never thought I would be walking up to meet the president. I had to slap myself and say, are you dreaming? I'm actually here at the White House? Come on. It was amazing. And, Joe, right? He's a busy guy. He said he planned to see us for maybe 15 minutes. We ended up talking for 2 hours, just talking and getting to know each other, talking about family, talked about his kids. I mean, he's a family man, and we got to learn that.
So was that the moment then where you just really realized that this movie was it?
It was a moment where I just realized I never thought that this movie could impact the world like that, and it made me feel so wonderful. Even my children and other CODAs that I've never met, thank yous from all of them, and that was really nice to feel, and it really helped me feel good about what I've been doing over the years. There's so many CODAs out there.
And remember the word that you told me?
The 3 words? We were on set, shooting, and I was watching the set, and she was a master director. Personally, I've directed a few projects, and I understand a little bit about deaf and hearing work together, and after the second week, I was extremely impressed, and I took Sean aside and I said, you know what, Sean, this movie is going to be fantastic. I said 3 words. I told you. And she said, hold on, let's just wait and see. And when the time came, and we're out there at Sundance, and they announced the awards, I tapped her on the shoulder. I said, remember those 3 words? I told you this movie would be great. And sure enough, at the Academy Awards, same thing. I tapped her and said, 3 words, right? Didn't I tell you? I knew there was something special about this project. And here we are again. Here we are.
And yes, let's give a moment of applause. When he won the Oscar, did you tell him, I told you, those 3 words? Did you share those with him? No? No. You should have. Oh, well, maybe you could just write something else again, right? We'll get it out there.
Well, what happened at the Oscars, I'm going to tell you guys this story. I knew Troy was going to win. I really didn't think that we were going to win the other 2. And when Troy won, Steven Spielberg was sitting in front of me, and he turned around, he looked right at me, and he said, 1 out of 3 to me. And I was sitting with my husband, and I was like, did Steven Spielberg just talk to me? What did he just say? And he said 1 out of 3. He thinks you're going to win all of them, all the 3 that you're. And I was like, no way. And I got up from my seat and went to locked myself in the bathroom and started practicing my speech, because I was like, oh God, what if I do win and then I have to get up there? So I was in the stall of the bathroom for like, 20 minutes of the Oscars because I was so panicked, like, oh, I better actually work on this if Steven Spielberg thinks that we might win. So I have him to thank for the fact that I was prepared to give that speech.
If I ever see Steven Spielberg, I will tell him that it's because of what he told you that you knew that you was going to have to prepare for that. Troy?
I wasn't worried about whether Sean's speech would be great because I can't hear anyways.
I'm wondering, earlier you had said, one of my favorite stories about CODA and the whole process, how it was such a journey. And you were saying, how it seemed to be dead in the water, that you had different visions than what the studio had. So then I know that Marley was involved, Marley Matlin, but not to have the other two deaf characters they were going to be hearing. And then Marley had a conversation with you, right? You sat down, had a one-on-one, and she said, if that were to happen, I will leave the production. So in that moment, you, Sean, what was your thought process? I mean, obviously you listened to her and obviously you believed that that was the way things needed to do to have authentic casting. And the reason why CODA really took off is because you had authentic people in the roles. But what was your process when you were going through this in the moment? Were you kind of scared thinking, okay, we're gonna have 3 deaf characters. How are we gonna be able to do that? And it's against what the studio's wishing. So walk me through your thought process, how you finally came to the point where you said, yes, I support Marley in this idea.
Well, I had been fighting already for that. So Marley, what I felt like when Marley said that was I had an ally, because these were conversations that I had been having with the studio, with my casting directors, with everybody. When I met with Marley, I had already seen Troy on stage. So I brought up to Marley, like, this is who I want for Frank. And she was like, he's perfect. That's who it has to be. It was when I told Marley that the studio was pushing back at me and saying, no, they don't want to do that. They want movie stars in these roles. So the thing that I had with Marley is I had, I was not famous. I was, I had made 1 feature and the studio was my first studio movie. Marley is a famous actress. So it was one thing for me to be arguing that to the studio. It's a very different thing when I can go, hey, you guys have Marley Matlin who's agreeing to do this movie. She's going to walk off the movie if you insist on that. So she really threw her weight behind that. But there was no way that I could have made this movie with hearing actors in those roles. It wasn't possible. And that was the thing that I was arguing from the beginning. It's like, what was I going to have hearing actors just learn these lines? Like, there was no way to explore, even from a pure creative standpoint for me as a director, there would be no authenticity to this family. There would be no ability to improvise or have scenes together or like really flesh out who this family was and have any exploration at all of deaf culture. So from a creative point, I couldn't see it in any other way. Not just from a political, like, this is the right thing to do, but just like, what would be the point of making this movie if you weren't going to portray family in a way that felt authentic and real? So that was the challenge. And even with Marley and I going to them, they sort of went, okay, great. And once they saw Troy's audition, I will say Troy's audition was a huge turning point for me with the studio, because once I could show them Troy's audition, and everybody, even the top executives at Lionsgate, there was no question that that was Frank. So then they said to me, okay, then you need to go find a pop star to be Ruby. And because that was how they could see the movie getting financed. So it was like, okay, if you want Troy and you want Daniel and you want this deaf cast, like, go get, Taylor Swift to be Ruby. Nothing against Taylor Swift. I'm sure she's a brilliant actress, but I knew also that I needed Ruby. I was searching for a CODA. I was searching for someone. If I couldn't find a CODA who could sing like that, which I tried and couldn't, I needed to find someone who's going to train for 9 months to be able to sign as close to a CODA as I could. So it wasn't an option for me to go get a pop star who was going to, show up and like learn her lines and sign. So those were all the challenges. And on one hand, I understand that studios have a system where they finance their movies by getting famous stars in there, and that's how they get their financing. It's just, we can find a way to be more creative. And I think the most validating thing about CODA was proving that this movie that doesn't have a lot of known faces in it, you know, and doesn't have some big concept behind it or superheroes or anything, like, caught people's hearts and was commercial and was profitable and did sell at Sundance for the biggest sale that they've ever had out of Sundance. So that was really validating, and I hope it's a lesson to these studios moving forward that, like, these old models are not the way we should do things anymore.
You know, that's what makes you a great director, and I'm sure that, you know, they wanted other people to play Frank before me. Who were they? Give me names. Robert De Niro.
He's too old. Great actor, but
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay, we do have to wrap it up, but I do have a final question for both of you. What's next for you? You know, it doesn't have to be what you're actually doing next, but what do you envision happening? What do you see for the future of Hollywood? And it can be stuff you're actually working on, but it could just be dreams you're thinking of, the next step. You know, now that CODA's pushed you this far, what's next?
I personally would like to see many opportunities open up, not only for deaf actors, but writers, directors, producers. I understand that my weight may be just enough to sell a little story, but studios sell stories. They sell music and lyrics and screenwriting and directors, and I hope that studios start to shift towards understanding the audience that hears and also the audience that doesn't, and brings them along for the ride too. Don't ever forget that the studios owe us as a deaf community, because we've been watching films before the silent era started. The silent era is when the deaf community was a strong part of the movie-going audience. And once sound came in, we were pushed to the side, and they forgot that we were loyal customers at the beginning, and we've been waiting for years, waiting as an audience to be able to access the beauty of Hollywood. We've had to wait for months and months and months for films on reels, films on VHS, films on DVD that are subtitles. And I've been on this earth for 53.25 years, and I've seen the improvements, but they're slow to come. And I think that CODA is that one movie with burned-in subtitles that is going to affect studios in general and give them the understanding that there are audiences that don't hear, and that there are deaf audiences that maybe hear a little and don't speak that well, or speak well but don't hear that well. And there's audience members out there of all types, and give them the choices. My parents can hear, and I can't. And we can sit together now and watch a movie together and laugh and cry and respond together in the moment. And equality for audiences is something that I hope that Hollywood picks up, and they take a step forward, and they move forward and think outside the box. And with this great director at my side, with her great heart, she brought that understanding to Hollywood, and I thank her for that. And I thank all of you, and I hope that some of you go out and direct pieces and work on films. And I'm sure her phone is blowing up. Sean, help us. How are we going to work with the deaf audience? How are we going to hire deaf actors? And now she's our star consultant in the industry. And hey, don't call me for any questions. I'll be out on the golf course.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it with you.
Thank you.
We could do this for another 2 hours, but I know some people need to be going to bed. It's getting kind of late. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Love you. So good to see you, Shoshana. Love you all.
thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Text, Realibilities Film Festival. Feature Film Q&A, CODA, 10/21/22.